It's good. I hate to say this, but can you hear me now? All right. You saw that it wasn't my fault. There's been a lot of things that are my fault, but that wasn't one of them. So I'm so glad that you came back this Sunday, because last Sunday was my first Sunday, and you still showed up today. So I was going to say this last Sunday, but Paul and Sandy, they weren't here last Sunday in this class. Many of you don't know it, but Sandy is the last Sunday school teacher that I had that's still, I'm not going to say still alive, I'm going to say still going to church, so you know what that means. But Sandy was the last, or is the last Bible school teacher that I had. And I'm talking about in the 1960s. So when I look at Sandy, whatever good that you find in me, that's part of it right over here. And I just wanted y'all to know that I love her very much. She didn't know I was going to say that, so I don't mean to embarrass her. But you look around and you see people who's made a difference in your life. And at the time, I didn't know what kind of difference she was making, but thank you, Sandy, very much. Last week, we started the study of Proverbs, and we talked about wisdom, and we talked about knowledge. We talked about the difference between knowledge and wisdom, and we talked about fearing God. And we didn't get down to the questions. And so I want to kind of pick up there just on the questions, and then we'll go into today's study. Now, I want you to help me on this. I don't want to just ask questions and nobody say anything. The first question that we have to discuss is, what does it mean to fear God? What does that mean? Reverence, okay. That's excellent. You have a reverence for God. What else does it mean? Awe. You stand in awe. Have you ever seen a sunset and it's just beautiful, and it's like, I'm in awe of that sunset, and you can't, or at least I can't put it into words. I can't say what I'm looking at. So I think that's right. Awe. You're in awe of God. And in a way, that's fearing God because you're in awe of Him. What about respect? Respect what Ethel says, respect what He says. You respect who He is. I grew up respecting my father. When I was real young, I feared him with the fear of getting a spanking, okay? But later on, I feared my father with the right kind of fear, with the respect, with the awe. So any other things that you can think of, what does it mean to fear the Lord? Boundaries? Boundaries. That's good, Jack. Because if you read the Bible, you know where the boundaries are. You know, I think about, and I've never had one, but I think about dogs with shock collars. You know, there's boundaries with dogs with shock collars. And they learn them, don't they? They know how far they can get out, and they better stop. And it's just second place for them. I think sometimes if we realize, Jack, the boundaries that God has set for us, we'd get in a whole lot less trouble if we would respect them. But that's good, Jack. Anything else that you can think of? Obedience. You know what? When we're talking about fearing my dad, I was obedient to my dad. And so I hadn't even thought of that, Jerry. That's really good. If you fear the Lord, you will be obedient to the Lord. I like that. I really do. Okay. Number 2. Why is fear the beginning of wisdom? Why is that? Okay. If you couldn't hear, she says you got to have those things in order to have the wisdom. So fear is part of that necessary component to have wisdom. You got to stop. You got to start somewhere on your journey in wisdom. You don't just wake up one day and have it. You know, I'm 66 years old, and back when I was 36, I'll just use that. When I was 36, I thought I had arrived. I thought, you know, I'm pretty smart. And then when I turned 46, I look back when I was 36, and I told myself, man, you didn't know near. Yeah, Daryl said, didn't know nothing. Okay, then 56, I look back at 46, and I thought, I have arrived now. And 66. And now I'm thinking, is there going to be much left for me to learn? But I know there is, because so you're right. You've got to start somewhere, and this fear of the Lord starts with allowing you to have wisdom. This next question is a jump off from this question. What happens next? If fear is the beginning of wisdom, what happens next? Well, I had 3 at one time. Love, okay. The teaching of that wisdom, you put that wisdom in use. Knowledge, okay. So a combination of that, the love, the knowledge, the teaching. What good is wisdom if you don't use it? You know, we think about earthly wisdom, and we always think about somebody that's really old, like Daryl Hamby. And it's like, if I can sit at the feet of Daryl, I can gain some wisdom, because he's been down some roads I haven't been down. Daryl, how old are you? Daryl's 75, so he's 9 years older than I am. But he has some wisdom that I don't have. One thing is, he's been in the Word 9 more years than I have. I want to answer that question, what happens next? I want to answer it in the, not negative, but I want to answer it by saying what happens next is you don't quit. You start gaining wisdom, and you don't stop. You don't stop when you're 36, 46, 56, 66. You start using that wisdom that God gives you. If you don't fear God, then how are you ever going to have the wisdom that He'll give you? Have you ever thought about that? If I hadn't respected my earthly father, then whatever wisdom he had, and he was a wise man, I wouldn't have obtained that wisdom because I had no respect for him. So same way with God. If we respect God, we're going to get wisdom. Now, this one's kind of an easy question. How is biblical wisdom different from intelligence or education? Jerry and Novita, when I say this, I mean it out of love. You're two old educators. Answer that question. How is this wisdom, biblical wisdom, different than education and intelligence?
I only wish that Brother Dan would got his request when he said, I wish that every high school senior would be taught the book of Proverbs. And because you have to separate state from church, you're limited when you get before a class of students today of what you say or what you teach. But one educates the mind, the other one educates the heart and your soul.
Yeah, the last thing Jerry said was one educates the mind and one educates the heart. And that's really, really a good answer, because I don't care if you're the smartest man or woman on earth. I saw something the other day about some woman that had this IQ was just unbelievable, like way above Einstein. And I was thinking about that. I don't care how smart she was, and I don't know anything about her spiritual life, but that's not important, the intelligence or the education that she had, if she didn't have the heart education. So that's a good answer. Okay, now this next question: why is humility the key to gaining wisdom? Humility. Why do you need that in order to gain wisdom? Bobby, you're saying something.
I was just mumbling to Joanne. Kind of what it means is you can't learn very much if your mouth is wicked. So it means keep your mouth shut and listen more and study more.
Bobby said keep your mouth shut, listen, and study more. Years ago, I was up at the courthouse, up on a second floor, and these guys were out there talking, and they had court that day, and they had some of their friends up there, and they weren't up there for good court. They were up there for bad court. And I heard one of them tell the other one, he said, take the cotton out of your ears and put it in your mouth. I had never heard that before, but Bobby, that's what you're talking about. Listen. And if you have humility, it's a whole lot easier to listen. It's a whole lot easier to gain wisdom. If you don't have humility, then you know it all. And if you know it all, then you don't need wisdom because you already know it. But we know that that's not true. No one knows it all. So if you have humility, it's a whole lot easier to gain wisdom. Any other thoughts on that? Okay, we're going to move to today's lesson. In today's lesson is choosing life's path, the paths of life. Okay, when I was a child in the late '60s, when I had Sandy, in the late '60s, when I was a child, we lived way out in the country, and back then, out in the country was out in the country. You were by yourself. There might have been another house on the section line, but you were by yourself and it was dark. Okay? And I remember one time going down to the creek at nighttime, and the creek was quite a ways from our house, and I was going down there with my dad. And so I want to use the word, I called him Daddy, but I want to use the word Father for this story, okay? I was going down to the creek with my father. And any other time, well, I'll even say that time, I was scared of the dark, okay? I was scared of the dark. But my father was going down to the creek, and he had a path that he was on to go to the creek. And I think he probably had a little old flashlight or something, because it was dark. But I was staying right beside my father. And I did not venture off of that path. I did not venture to the left. I didn't venture to the right. I stayed right with my Father. And you know why I stayed with my Father? Because I knew as long as I was with my Father, I was okay. And I knew as long as I was with my Father, I was protected. I didn't know what was out there, but He did. My Father knew what was out there. And I've never forgotten that. It didn't mean anything to me at the time, but now that I'm grown, I look back and I see there was a biblical lesson there because I was sticking close to my Father, okay? When we stick close to our Father, how does our lives, how do they work? Do they work out better? Do we have less problems? Do we have less fear? He's the light of the world. And that night, my Father was the light of my world. And I knew as long as I stayed with Him and stayed on that path, everything was all right. Everything. All right. Choosing life's path involves a conscious process. You got to think about it. You've got to do this self-reflection. You've got to explore the options. You've got to make some decisions and some active implementations. If you don't make some decisions to stay on the paths that are right, what's going to happen to you? You're going to wonder. And when you wander off that path, what happens to you? You get lost. And I've known people in my life, and you have too, that have wandered off the path. They've gotten lost, and they've not come back because they're lost. Whether they can't find their way back, or whether there's roadblocks or whatever, they've wandered off the path and they can't come back. It's kind of like you step into the driver's seat of your own existence in order to go down these paths, and you're making decisions that align with your values and your goals. Have y'all ever thought about that? Every one of you here has some values, and I'm not talking about your value, how much you're worth. I'm talking about your values. Each one of you values something, and you have your set of values. Bill Tibbles and I used to go to lunch years ago, and I remember Bill using this word, or this phrase, and I've never forgotten it. And we talk about values, we talk about goals. Bill used the phrase core principles, and I had never heard that phrase, and it's not that complicated, but Bill was talking about if we don't have these core principles, core values, then we don't know. We don't know what we believe. I just met Gary, is it Stoles? Is that how you say your name? Okay, Gary Stoles. I just met him a while ago, and we were talking about different versions of the Bible. And Gary was talking about how he compares the versions. And that is so good because you get a core value of what the Bible is. And if we don't know what core values, core principles are, then we can get blowed like a boat without a sail. So I've never forgotten what Bill said. So choosing a path, you got to have some core values, some core principles to do that. If you have your Bible, let's turn to Proverbs 4:26. 4:26 Proverbs. This is going to be the main two verses that we're going to use today. Proverbs 26 and 27. Ponder the path of your feet, then all your ways will be sure. Do not swerve to the right or to the left. Turn your foot away from evil. Now, let's talk just a little bit about those two verses. Does somebody else have a different word in verse number 26? Mine starts out ponder. Does anybody else have a different word?
Mine says make level paths.
Make level, okay. I was going to talk about that. That's good, Joanne. Make level, okay. Does anybody, what version you have, Joanne? NIV, okay. Mine's ESV. Does anybody else? Watch, okay. Watch, make level, ponder, consider, okay. Boy, there's a lot of good words there. Yes. Give careful thought. Okay. When you ponder something, if I say, hey, have you pondered going to Texas next week? What does that mean? Giving a lot of thought about it. Am I going to go? How am I going to go? Do I need gas? I mean, do I have money? What am I going to do? Yeah, when am I leaving? What am I going to do when I get down there? What kind of clothes do I need to take? You ponder something. Okay? Well, this verse says, ponder the path of your feet. Do we ever think about where we're going? Listen, I've gotten in trouble in my life throughout my 66 years because I didn't ponder where I was heading, where my feet were leading me. I didn't consider all those things that you said. Joanne said make level, and I've got a footnote that says make level. What's the hardest thing to walk on? Something that's level or something that's rough and rocky and incline? Something that's level. So you make level your steps, and it's so much easier. It makes me think of a story when Jerry Walker and I went to Africa in 1994. We were really way out there out there as far as you can be in the world. And we were Phil Palmer's red Toyota truck. And Jerry, I guess your back has hurt over half your life, because I distinctly remember we were going down a hill and it was so rough that Jerry got out. I don't know if you remember this, Jerry, but you got out to the top of the hill, and I've got pictures. I wanted to make pictures, and Jerry said, let me walk down this hill instead of being jostled in this truck. But that's how rough that road was. And I remember thinking, well, if I walked down that hill, I'd fall because of all the pits and the rocks and everything. But it's hard to walk on things that has obstacles in those. So, like Joanne said, make level your paths. And if you do that, your ways will be sure. So that's a promise. Now he tells us in verse 27, he tells us, do not swerve to the right or to the left. Somebody read me a different version. Do not swerve to the right or to the left. Don't get sidetracked, okay? Anybody else got a version that's different than that? Joanne, what's your version? Do not swerve to the right or to the left. Don't turn, okay? Stay on that path and don't get off of it. I mean, even if it's a little, I like Jerry's deal. It says, don't turn. If we turn, we're going to see something, aren't we? On the right or the left. I've seen things before that I shouldn't have got involved in because I looked at it. Okay? And so if I don't turn to look at it, then I'm going to stay on that path. And the last part of that is turn your foot away from evil. So there's evil. When I was a little kid, that dark, there was evil on both sides of me when I was with my daddy. And I did not turn my foot from the good path, and I made sure I wasn't turning my feet to the outside. So that's kind of our kickoff verses in Proverbs for today. As a Christian, our paths should lead us to righteousness. You know, I've heard before people say, well, how do you get to be a righteous man? How do you get to be a righteous woman? How do you do that? Well, one way is the path that you're on. All paths lead somewhere. And if you're on a bad path, it's going to lead you somewhere, but it's not going to be righteousness. And so as a Christian, if we choose the right path, and we know, don't think we don't know what the right path. Now, sometimes I chose the wrong path, but I knew it. I knew it when I was choosing it. I shouldn't be doing this. But if you choose the right path, it will lead you to righteousness. The word path, this is kind of interesting. For that and 50 cents, well, no, not 50 cents, that and $5 will get you a cup of coffee. You know, I grew up saying that and 50 cents will get you a cup of coffee. Bill grew up saying that and 10 cents will get you a cup of coffee. But this deal here is path is used in the Bible 104 times. So there must be something to it if God put 104 times in the Bible about the word path used in different contexts and everything. Proverbs 3:6. Let's turn to Proverbs 3:6. Three six says, "In all your ways acknowledge Him; He will make straight your paths." So in other words, the opposite of that is, if you don't acknowledge God, which way are you going to go, Jackie? You're going to go in that traffic in the wrong lane, aren't you? And what might happen when you go in the wrong lane? Bad stuff. Bad stuff. So this says, He will make straight your paths. So if you acknowledge Him, what? Some ways, sometimes, always. If you acknowledge Him all your ways, then He will make straight your paths. Does anyone have a different version on that verse 6? Pardon me? Direct your path. You know, at the house, usually I'm not talking real good about Michelle, and I'm saying funny things about Michelle, but I want to give her a shout out on this. Michelle directs me in good ways. Michelle directs me, same way with you, Lewis. Not that I like it, but I like being directed in the right way. You know, nowadays, every one of you probably has a GPS on your phone, on your car, and it directs you in the right way. And so I like being directed in the right way. And this tells us that if we will acknowledge God, He will make straight our paths. Life is full of choices. You know, when God made us, you know, He made us with free will. we can choose whatever we want to do. I've heard Daryl, and Daryl, I've listened to you for years. Daryl likes chocolate cake. Is that right, Daryl? Oh, yeah. Okay. I like bread. I'm a big bread eater. Daryl cannot quit eating chocolate cake, I can't quit eating bread. And I know where that's going to lead to. I know I'm not diabetic, but I'm as close as you can get to it, okay? And so I know what's going to happen. Life is full of choices. Wisdom leads to life. Foolishness leads to destruction. Daryl eating that chocolate cake and me eating the biscuits and the bread and the rolls, I know where that's going to lead me. I know it. It's foolishness on my part. And so that's something that I can give an earthly example of. Okay? Now, what's really important is in the spirit world, in our world with God. Foolishness leads to destruction. And we know what destruction is. Boy, that's a hard word for me to say. We know what when you destruct yourself, that's a bad thing. And what's the word for destruction? What? Death? Okay, keep going. It's a bad word that we don't say sometimes. It's hell, isn't it? Isn't that where destruction ultimately ends up? And God says if you're foolish, that's where that's going to lead to. So we have these paths, and if we're not wise, if we don't choose the right one, we're going to wind up going to destruction. I tell you what.
Larry, I keep thinking about Dan's sermon about going to Oklahoma City, and he's on the path, and he's going straight on that path, but he sees the Dairy Queen and the hamburger sign, and he gets off the path. I just keep thinking of that.
And Dan gets off the path, and he said Burger King, gets off the path, and he has a cheeseburger. But while he's off the path, he gets to thinking about it. And he says, I need to get back on that path. And this has been about 5 to 10 years ago, so I'm surprised you remember it, Ethel. and Dan was telling us so we would feel better about ourselves. I'm glad you brought that up, because people think, oh, I got off the path and I made a mistake and now I'm worthless. But Dan, in his story was, we do that. We make mistakes. And Dan said, we get off the path. And he said, I want that cheeseburger at Burger King. But he says, the reason we're okay is because we think about it. And we think about, you know what? I better get back on that path. And then he says, I get back on that path, and I go, and I go, and I go, and here's Shawnee, and there's a Burger King again. And he said, I get off that path, and I go to Burger King. And he said, you know, I think about it, and I shouldn't have stopped. And I better get back on that path. And Dan says, I get back on that path. Well, see, that's the good news, because sometimes we get off that path. But the important thing is, get back on that path. We all make mistakes, so get back on that path. I'm glad you said that, Daryl.
I wonder how much Solomon viewed his dad, because his dad was someplace where he shouldn't have been, took one look, and that took him off down a path that took him years to get back off of. And that was where murder and all these other things entered his life, off of the path that he took from one look.
And when he was a young man, he started on the right path, didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
And he was going so good, and then he pulled off at Burger King.
Got him a rock and went out there and slew a giant when nobody else would even give it a thought.
That's right.
And then here he takes one look off of a rooftop
And we have a baby that died. We had a man that died that was a soldier, and we had a woman and David that committed adultery. Yes, Jerry.
So the implication is very powerful here, because you may find yourself back on that path, but those who you influenced, who you saw, or who you raised as children, may not venture back.
That's so good, Jerry. He's talking about the example, about how we can become a stumbling block. How I'm driving down I-40 and I look over there and there's Dan at the Burger King. And like, you know what? I was not going to stop. I had the willpower. You know, I wasn't going to eat that chocolate cake. I had the willpower. But look, Dan's over there, so I'm going to pull over there myself. So, Jerry, that is a point well taken. Always remember, even though we can get back on the path, I might pull over and say, hey, I like this Burger King, and I like the way this tastes. And from now on, I'm going to participate in this. Did the first bell ring? Okay. Any other thoughts? Pardon me? Charlie's Chicken. Yeah, whatever it is.
Y'all need to get it straight. It was McDonald's and quarter pounders.
Is McDonald's and quarter pounders? Okay, I've got one thing to end with, if I can find it. I hate when people fool with their phone, and that's why I don't ever use it up there, up front. A lot of people do, but they're a lot better than I am. Okay, this is not a biblical poem, but it is a biblical poem, okay? And I'll leave it with this. The Road Not Taken, but Robert Frost. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler, long I stood and looked down the one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for the passing there, had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first one for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Whatever road you take, whatever path you take, will make all the difference here and there. Y'all have a good week.